The question that you're asking is extremely important. The question is, what went wrong for a man that came, as a hero from the DP bloc and brought many of his colleagues? The question is, how did it end up, being this ugly? That relationship between Matthew Mpuga with NUP, National Unity Platform. This question begs for a profound, substantive political question in terms of political dynamics and in terms as far as leadership is concerned. And this friction, obviously, caused by Mpuga's entry into NUP, was obviously celebrated first of all as a hero from the Democratic Party bloc, but was a strategic masterstroke, you could argue, in terms of symbolizing or unifying a force that actually combined NUP's youthful favor with the seasoned political wisdom of DP stalwarts. So his rise to prominence as a leader of opposition reflected what we call a collective hope in terms of effective parliamentary governance and resistance against what they call autocracy. However, the question obviously can be argued in terms of a trajectory that took what they call undesirable turn due to some of the key factors that I will want to break down for you. Number one, the failure of aligning strategic visions between Mpuga and NUP leadership contributed to a growing discontent. So while Mpuga may have actually sought a more pragmatic and institutional approach to parliamentary engagement, some elements within NUP may have actually favored a more radical, what they call street-based activism. And this clash of operational philosophies created a friction-filled with environment. Okay? So as John Locke reminds us, for example, that the end of the law is not to abolish or restrain, but to preserve and to enlarge freedom. So Mpuga's approach to this kind of legal reforms and measured leadership may have actually been misinterpreted as a political inertia by the broader NUP fraternity. And that is something you must comprehend from the word go. Now, number two, we could also argue that the communicational breakdown and misaligned expectation played a pivotal role, in terms of political success, which is often a dance between leadership and followership, in terms of who is following who. So while Mpuga may have actually used a tactical mastermind in terms of underestimating the emotional symbolic pool of, the so-called Bobiwine leadership, which thrives on mass mobilization, by the way. Conversely, you should argue that NUP's central leadership may have actually failed to fully appreciate Mpuga's sophisticated or even albeit slower path in terms of reform. So as the adage goes, unity without strategy is actually chaos. Now, the inability to strike a balance between the immediate fairy activism and long-term institutional change created a void that actually caused a disillusionment in terms of that kind of dispensation, if you like, larger. Now, obviously, finally, as far as your question was concerned, is that there's a question of power dynamics within, opposition politics that are inherently precarious. Mpuga's role in terms of balancing what they call a broader opposition, in terms of the interest with NUP's specific political objectives, was an inevitable tightrope, So the absence of a coherent or mutually binding performance framework led to a divergent interpretation of success and reality. We could argue, just like Nelson Mandela observed, that it is better to lead from behind and put others in front, especially when you celebrated victory. In terms of that, failure to celebrate collective victories and manage internal contradiction proved extremely costly. Now, I would like to argue in terms of your second question. The second question had to do with who went wrong. When you're analyzing the NUP/Bobiwine and Mpuga fallout, it's important for you to understand what failed to play as far as their part is concerned in terms of making things work. Now, for starters, we could have comprehend and understand that the political fallout between Mpuga and NUP raises a critical question about leadership accountability and political maturity. That's something that's extremely important. In truth, the fault does not lie with one party alone, but with a complex of web in terms of missteps from both sides. And I'll argue it this way. Let's start with Mpuga. From Mpuga's perspective, his failure, for example, to adapt to the NUP's populist and high, octane political rhythm weakened his influence, while his intellectual rigor and experience are undeniable. That is something we must understand from the word go. But you see, politics is much about perception. It's about policy, okay? And his substitute style may have actually been interpreted as a detachment or even compromise. We could argue, as the Theodore Roosevelt once remarked, that in a moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. So the next best thing is the wrong thing. So the worst thing you can do is nothing. So Mpuga's cautious approach actually may have actually inadvertently bred precautions in terms of what they call inaction, and that is something that you may want to comprehend again from the word go. On the other hand, NUP's leadership, including Bobiwine, must account for their failure to cultivate an inclusive leadership culture that embraces what they call ideological diversity. In terms of, when you're arguing in terms of leadership, leadership is about managing contrasts and successful movements, which require both visionary, radical, and even tempered strategies. And so Bobiwine's revolutionary charisma may have actually overshadowed the need for what they call methodological parliamentary work. So by failing to create a structured or even what they call collegial mechanism for addressing internal differences, NUP basically allowed minor grievances to escalate into irreconcilable disputes. Obviously, a house divided against itself cannot stand, just like Abraham Lincoln actually noted. Now, also important to note as far as that particular issue is concerned is that the broader institutional weakness within NUP contributed to this fallout, by the way. The lack of substantive clear governance, for example, in terms of framework for managing inter-party roles and even expectations, weaken this kind of cohesion. So Mpuga's contribution, such as leading in the push for parliamentary accountability, may have actually gone undervalued in a party culture driven by street level politics, and that is something you must understand. So the absence of intentional mentorship and conflict resolution mechanism compounded the breakdown of this particular dispensation that we're talking about. I mean, as Kwame Nkrumah advised, organization decides everything. So lack of substantive organization definitely may have led to the debacle that we're talking about today. If you argue in terms of conclusion, in light of the question that you asked, my dear friend, I would argue and say that both NUP and Mpuga share responsibility. Mpuga's intellectual prowess needed stronger grassroots resonance, while NUP required a more sophisticated strategy that married activism with governance. And the argument here is that successful political movements thrive on unity in diversity. That is something substantially new to appreciate. And the tragedy lies not in the ideological differences, but in the failure to manage them constructively. So this saga serves definitely as a poignant reminder that political alliances must be nurtured through shared vision, clear communication, and even mutual respect. I hope I've been of help. Thank you for those questions.